Welcome to the five of us. We are five outspoken women with close to 150 years of experience as broadcast journalists. We left our jobs on the very same day, and we are dedicated to helping women avoid the many pitfalls common to the workplace. We've heard from hundreds of people recounting tales of woe on the job, and we have done the research. We're putting it all in a book, and we are here to help. I'm Roma Torrey, and along with Kristen Shaughnessy, Janine Ramirez, Vivian Lee, and Amanda Farinacci, we are the five of us.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be back with all of you. This has been fun. We are going to talk about a subject today that I'm going to address the guys. And I'm talking about the guys listening to the podcast. You're going to want to slip out of this conversation real quick when you hear what we're going to discuss. But we want you to stick around. Because if you'll never have the experience of your body unexpectedly heating up like a furnace at 250 degrees and breaking into a full-on soak through your clothes kind of sweat while you're at work, you should at least get an idea of what many women have or will be going through at some point. We are talking about menopause today. It's not just hot flashes. Women of a certain age, usually late 40s and 50s, deal with. The list of symptoms is long. Insomnia, weight gain, depression, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, and memory lapses. That's just to name a few. We haven't even talked about how it could affect someone's sex life. So we're going to get into it. We'll see where this goes, but I'm going to start with you, Janine. We're just going to talk about, this is a subject that doesn't get talked about a lot. You know, I think in recent years we've started talking about it, but we had a colleague who used to put a fan on her desk. I think we all remember it. And we all kind of chuckled. It'd be like a raging snowstorm outside, and there would be the fan going. And we didn't really understand because we weren't of a certain age.
Yeah, I mean, people don't really talk about it that much, right? So you have lack of sleep, night sweats, there are mood swings, there are these body temperature fluctuations going on, there's this focus lapse, brain fog, loss of energy, and older women are dealing with this, right? So sometimes early. So right, I was early menopause, so I was dealing with it, and then but mostly 50 and over is really more the bracket age, and again, this is where ageism and sexism come into play. Okay, so older women already they're already dealing with societal pressures, right? They're dealing with negative narratives about them. They're dealing about their, getting old, what their face looks like, wrinkles. They talk about their body and gravity not holding up as well. So that's already happening. There's this increased scrutiny around aging and the fascination with youth. And it's more so, that it negatively impacts the women than the men. And menopausal women are viewed as hormonal, okay? We get labels, right? Hormonal or emotional, over-emotional, not sexy, unattractive, miserable, when you start expressing sort of these menopausal things that you're going through. And so at an age where women are already, facing even potential discrimination at the workplace, their experience is not as valued as some of the younger people coming in. Can you really address these issues at the workplace? Are you allowed to tell your manager, hey, I'm going through all this? Yeah. You know what? No, it's taboo. It is going to limit your career longevity if you start saying, I have these health issues because I'm going through menopause. It's not acceptable.
Yeah, it's true. And you bring up the ageism, because menopause happens at an age right when ageism actually starts to creep into the workplace as well. And to their credit, some employers are actually developing menopause at work policies. I think if men went through menopause, we'd have a lot of policies on the books, right? To go through. Yeah, you'd have a pill by now. You're right. But at least it's being more openly discussed, through forums like this and others. But what can a woman do, Roma? Because, it's that fine line. If you, as Janine said, if you complain, you might be out. Yeah. So you just kind of take it, but suffer. Yeah.
Well, the problem too, we all say this, but it does stem all the way back to when we wwere kids. I don't know about you guys, but my mom really didn't talk about it. She suffered it, but she never discussed it with me. So it was, the taboo started at a young age and it just carries on. But because it's something that just afflicts women, I think it's even more of a taboo because most of the time you work for men and men don't want to hear it. As you said, in your introduction, Kristen, men are going to want to walk into the other room when they hear that that's the subject of this. But let's make this plain and clear. It is a serious problem.
Yeah.
And when you consider, and when I say problem, because it does affect your domestic life, it affects your professional life across the board, and it lasts so damn long.
Oh, that was the other thing Joe, my husband, said to me. He said, how long does this go on? And I said, they said 7 to 10 years. He was like, 7 to 10 years?
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I know. I mean,
yeah.
I was even surprised. I didn't even know.
I had no idea
because
either.
we never
Yeah.
discussed it, and it was only when I started feeling it, I started to do my
Right.
own little research. But the sad thing is, how has menopause been regarded mostly in society? As a punchline, right? It's a joke. Oh, she's going through that thing.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem is that it does affect women who are older. And there is a theory that when women become infertile, they become less valued in society. And because of that, they get short shrift when there is an issue, a medical issue or a health issue that involves women at an age. You know, I found out a little interesting factoid that in Arabic, the word for menopause translates age of despair. I mean, isn't that incredible?
That's awful.
So, but I mean,
And menopause, the word the men is in there. Right? So we're
yeah, right.
Can't even get
Maybe
credit
they
for
don't
going through it.
They probably have a womenopause, and it's still age of despair. But here's the gist of this thing. Women fear talking about it, as you say, because once they do, they open up the floodgates for their bosses to say, well, if you're not, producing,
Get out.
maybe you better leave.
Yeah.
So, and then there was a study of about 1,000 women. 3 out of 5 of the women that were interviewed for this study said that going through menopause did negatively affect their ability to do their jobs. So, I mean, women are acknowledging it is something that holds them back, and yet they don't want to talk about it because their bosses, mostly men, and even, I'm sad to say this, a lot of women bosses just don't care, especially the younger ones who are, probably, years away from menopause and don't want to deal with it.
Well, it's one of those issues you don't think about it until you go through it, right? The only thing I remember my mom saying was just like, oh, is it hot in here? Is anybody hot?
Yeah.
And I didn't understand. Now I do that plus many other things with my kids so that they know. I'm like, you just wait until you're 54, right? Like,
well, what's really interesting? You know how in a previous episode we were talking about family leave for pregnancy or whatever, or any illness. But in the UK, there was a study done, and women who responded said that on average they took 20 days off to deal with menopause symptoms. Wow. Now, they could admit that because they were entitled to take those days off. In this country, you can't say, I don't feel well today because I'm going through menopause. You'd be laughed, off the stage, right? So.
And even among women, I think women would be like, just suck it up, right?
Yes.
Like, just deal with it. It's not just, this isn't a man versus woman thing. This is like, you would probably judge another woman who said, I have to go home because I'm having a hot flash, or I'm cranky, or I can't concentrate, or whatever it is.
Well, Kristen, how you said if men went through this, there would be some kind of policy. Uphill, right? Especially when you hear that it could involve painful sex, right? And as soon as men would hear that, or a decreased libido, which is also a symptom of menopause, I'm sure instantly guys would be all over that. We'd have a cure. It wouldn't even exist
Forget 10
men
years.
had to deal with
10
this,
days.
right? Painful sex. I'm out of here. I'm fixing that thing right away.
And it's not just the woman who is going through it. It impacts the family, right? Because if you're moody or whatever it is, or they don't really understand what you're dealing
yes,
with,
that's it.
And the workplace it deals with. But it also can have an impact on a woman's career. And there's statistics that show that. Viv, why don't you take that?
Yeah, electrahealth.com surveyed 2,000 women and corporate heads about what their experience with menopause at work was. And there's some astounding statistics. 30% of women report that menopause negatively impacts their work performance. 60% of women report that menopause negatively impacts their lives. But then there's the statistic about how many women actually thought about leaving their job or not going for a promotion after it was offered to them. And it's 20% who considered quitting and 18% who didn't pursue a promotion. So this it bears down on this underscored line that we've been pushing, which is ageism and sexism happens at a certain age. Janine, you mentioned this. There's a lot of stuff happening in a woman's life.
Yeah.
And I see it because I'm perimenopausal, I'm pretty sure now. I see it as that other bookend of your life that mirrors what happens with puberty. Puberty is widely accepted as something that needs to be talked about. There's a lot going on mentally and physically when you go through it. But why is menopause kind of seen as this, like a lot of other women's health issues, something that just can't be talked about? Well, in the workplace, this has a direct impact on the economy, on the outcomes for companies and organizations. It should be talked about. And a lot of women also reported that they felt there was an appalling lack of understanding regarding this, especially when you look at the benefits that are offered for fertility treatments and reproductive health in a company's benefit package. There is nothing for menopause support. And yet, these are women who are probably at the peak of their careers with a load of world experience that a company really cannot afford to lose. So,
but if women aren't speaking up about it, how do the people making the decisions know about it?
It's like mental health. If you don't talk about it, then it doesn't become acceptable.
Yeah, you almost can't blame the employer in this situation because women have sort of made it this taboo. Well, we'll just deal with it. We'll just suck it up and deal with menopause for 10 years.
And you talk about mental health. I mean, there are some mental manifestations of menopause that affects women at the same time, and this one maybe in some respects might be even worse because that would give, when you hear it causes brain fog or lack of focus, you lose concentration a little bit more, sort of like when you're pregnant, right? I mean, you kind of get a little foggy there. I think it's another excuse for your managers or your employers to say, well, she's just not producing enough. Maybe we should, and at that age, it's easy to get rid of a woman, especially because you've probably been in the job for a goodly number of years and you're at a salary level that, maybe they realize, well, we could get some young kid at half the salary to do the same job and they won't have all those problems that those older ladies have, right? So it's terrible to say, but there ought to be some kind of policy. There should be some legislation or something that protects women, not just, we were talking about pregnancy a few episodes ago, but when women go through this change of life, it shouldn't be something you're ashamed of or embarrassed about. It should be something that's dealt with head on.
So let's go to Amanda. She's got this for us because we're going to talk about what resources do women need, right, when they're going through this, but also what can employers know or workplaces do to help women because it's an economic issue too.
Yeah, it definitely becomes that. It affects like every facet of your life, right? Like I'm only 43, right? So I'm maybe the person you're like, she doesn't get it yet. But I'm on a medication that is designed to send me to early menopause, and so I've experienced a lot of what this is, and it's really you saying it's not you shouldn't be embarrassed or ashamed by it, but like the most disturbing part for me is like sometimes I'm in the middle of a sentence and I'm like I don't even know if I just completely lose my train of thought and I'm like, this is so mortifying. I'm being asked a question and I know the answer.
It's better than 43-year-old sentence.
No, but here's the thing is like when I was told about taking the medication, it's like, oh, it's designed to put you into early menopause. I sort of like heard that but didn't really hear it, right? So I was like, okay, shut up, whatever, next. But then when it started happening to me, I was having a conversation and somebody said to me, like, you really need to Google the symptoms because you're not crazy. This is actually a thing that's happening to you in your life, right? Yeah. And I mean, I'm not going to call a person I work for and say, by the way, I'm feeling really foggy today.
Yes,
Can you help me? Like, there's no appetite for that kind of sympathy. That just doesn't exist. Yeah. So anyway, to your point, something needs to give, right? Because guess what? Just like we all get older, these are physiological things that naturally happen in the course of a woman's life, right? There's no like medical pill or magical pill that you could take that's going to help you skip. They might give you some relief, like some people take hormone therapy.
I take hormone replacement, and I thought it would be like the cure, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. This is going to be great. I still wake up every 2 hours with hot flashes. They're just not like sweat through the sheets hot flashes, right?
It's crazy. It's just crazy.
Nuts.
So there are some studies, like obviously we're 5 women. We're not all having the same experiences. There might be some threads that are universal, but most women, I think, if you ask them, have some desire for some solution that would be addressed in their workplace, which is just first, I think some sympathy and some compassion, right? Like just like, hey, I know you're going through something, right? Like, and guess what? It's beyond your control. Right. It's not like you woke up today and you're trying to be a malingerer. Yeah. It's like by the way, you have this physical thing that's happening to you, similar to your point with puberty and all of this stuff, right? 62% of women would find support from an employer helpful if there were more flexible work policies. Maybe you need a later start because you didn't sleep last night. Maybe a couple days a week you want to come in 2 hours later. 38%, that's 38% of women. 26% of women want, like, how ridiculous this is. Educational trainings, just to say to people, by the way, guys, menopause is a real thing. Like,
guess
we
what?
just have the conversation at work, right? And then other people ask for support groups. I'm not sure that the workplace is necessarily the place to have that kind of thing, but actually, there's support groups for a lot of things at work. So throw it on the list. You know what I mean? Like,
there's a North American Menopause Society.
There is?
And it's a collective of clinicians and medical professionals from across North America who are talking about the latest studies that show things like menopause has some direct link to heart failure. And choline levels. We've heard as mothers, you're supposed to take in a lot of choline when you're pregnant to help the brain's development of the baby. Well, apparently at menopause, that is helpful too. But there are more and more studies that are starting to focus in on how menopause directly affects other aspects of your health in your old age. And these days, we're talking about how to age not only gracefully, but healthfully, right? And age in a way that doesn't put a burden on society's resources, on your family, and that gives you empowerment. So one of the pathways to that, I think, is being able to go to these resources and find out, there's a lot of people who are studying this. What do they know now? And what can I take in and talk to my medical professional about?
Well, and that's the other part too. Like, so when I was given the medicine, it was like, oh, it might cause this, whatever. But there was no like, this is real. There's no real submersive education. And I think that would go a long way. Like, I had somebody actually say to me, do me a favor, Google some symptoms, Google them once, get what you need, and don't do it again, right? Like, don't go back, right? Like, just to sort of learn, get some. But I think, like, one of the other statistics, 74% of women would find support from an expert platform helpful, where they could go and say, you're not nuts, here's what's happening, here's how you can help yourself, right? Like, make sure you exercise, make sure you do your best to get some sleep. Give yourself some grace if you feel that because I think part of what happens too is, because you're so not in control of what's happening with your body, you start to feel like,
who am I?
You feel a little lost, right? Like, especially we've been in these bodies for 40, 50, 60, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, where the hell do I live now?
It's like, who the F are you?
It's actually crazy.
I went to pick up my hormone replacement medicine, right? And it was at the drive-thru, and I say to the woman, and she looked about our age, so I was like, okay, I said, isn't it crazy that I have to pay for menopause? Like, this is nuts. And then she goes, let me tell you. She goes, 2 fans, an air conditioner, full blast. And this is December, right, that this conversation happened. And she said, and I had a terrible night's sleep, but I'm supposed to come to work. And she said, I'm supposed to read all these prescriptions and perform it, and I better not screw it up because, you could impact somebody else's health.
Same thing, financial burden. Like, if you have untreated hot flashes, costs billions of dollars a year. Financial burden, menopause doesn't fall only on women, it affects the workplace. Survey that I cited revealed 1.8 million women dropped out of the workforce since 2020, with turnover costs approximating 33% of an employee's salary, which is about $15,000 a year. Good news, though, is that it is becoming something that people talk. We know actress Naomi Watts. She has this not-for-profit. It's called Stripes. I think it's if you go on the website, there's like a ton of. She's partnered with a lot of like doctors and other celebrities, and they offer different tips. Basically, what we're talking about, like, you're not nuts, and we're all gonna let's just own this, right? Like, let's investigate it, and let's just own it and talk about it. I do think, though, the motto is like, it just sort of sums up, like, quote, welcome to a world where menopause isn't a dirty word, right? Because it's where we are, right? In 2023, where we're like, oh shit, is she going through her time? Like, it's like what you say.
Yeah, but that's the other thing. Well, we talked about employers not recognizing this, partly because women are not coming forward to complain or afraid to come forward to complain, but also because it's not that obvious. Like, if you're a pregnant woman and it's obvious you're pregnant and there's some specific ways that they have to accommodate you.
Unless you're sweating through your shirt.
Yeah, you could be sweating through your shirt. They're like, what's wrong with this person? But they still don't make the connection sometimes, right? Like, that's the reason, because they're not going through it, some of the men, and some of the women, maybe they just like, well, I suffered, you should suffer too.
It is true, right? It's sort of like, I did this, your mom didn't talk about it. Like, it's a generational thing. It's how we. So I guess the best thing, Viv, you always talk about educating your girls, and Amanda, right, as young. So maybe this is how we change things.
I mean, I've been going through some symptoms, and I'll mention like just how hot I'm getting, and then I'll say I'm at the time in my life where this is going to happen because my body is starting to go through some changes. I'm not producing eggs that are fertilizable.
Is this what you're saying to your kids?
I'm actually saying this to my kids. And you know what my oldest said to me? She said, "Your factory's shutting down." Ooh. And I was like, what? You're right. You're absolutely right.
Where did she get that?
I don't know. I don't know where she got that. I don't know if she's been talking about this, but I remember in third grade talking about girls getting their periods at, like, they're having these discussions.
Yeah.
So I might as well insert myself and try to hand over some wisdom, whatever little it is.
Information, yeah. You
It's
don't want the
factual.
third graders
Right.
learning.
I don't want to do what my mom did, which was she pulled right off the highway, like onto the shoulder, and she would breathe really hard as she was driving me to swimming or skating lessons. And I'd be like, "Mom, are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I just need a moment." And it was rattling to see my mom like unsettled that way because she didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to own it. And probably she had been told the same thing by her mom.
Right.
Like, just, you're not supposed to talk about this
Suffer in
stage.
silence. Yeah. Suffer in silence.
But it can be a real resurgence in another stage of your life, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're freed up from so many other things when you pass menopause. Well, when you hit menopause, and it's like all done.
Perimenopause is a thing too, right? Because that's like, you're not at menopause yet, but then you don't know when your period's coming. That's a whole other thing.
The worst is yet to come. That's all I can
And
tell
it's a
you.
warning.
Yeah, be warned. Forewarned is forearmed.
I thought when Roma told me about menopause, I remember you saying, and I was like, I'm going to skirt this. But there are some things you can do. Hormone replacement therapy, which I do, you've done, and Roma, you did.
Well, HRT, as they're known, got a really bad rap, I guess about 20 years ago, because there was a study that came out, and I think the NIH endorsed it, which National Institutes of Health endorsed it, and the study claimed that the hormone replacement therapy, which was basically just estrogen and progesterone supplements, caused breast cancer or increased the chances that a woman would get breast cancer. And because of that, all of a sudden, nobody was taking HRT. And then, the world was filled with women who were sweating profusely and not being able to sleep at night. And it was horrible. But
Get them something quick.
But I saw an op-ed from a renowned doctor in the Washington Post who said that that's really unfortunate. And he said, but even more unfortunate is that the NIH did not conduct any new studies on the effects of HRT on menopausal women for another 20 years. So we were left with this misinformation that, I think hurt a lot of women. But lately now, HRT has been more accepted, and as the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists say, it's safe. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not telling anybody to, go out and get, although you do need a prescription, so, don't take it from me. But talk to your doctor about it, because from what I'm hearing now, and even the American Cancer Society is saying, it is fairly safe as long as you go according to your doctor's advice. So
And it's
think about
interesting that you say that, and again, we don't really know, but my OBGYN, fine with me being on it, but my primary doctor was like, don't stay on it for more than a year.
Yeah, because there is conflicting information out there. So
we need to get that hammered out.
Do your research too, folks. I mean, there's some really reputable sources that you can check.
But the doctor who put me on hormone replacement therapy, she was just like, why suffer before you're meant to suffer? Like,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? You're young still,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, stay healthy and just do this because you have a lot more to give. Why should you start like losing even like bone and all that stuff?
Right, and it
already?
helps you sleep better. Your skin stays younger.
Yeah.
And this has a
Sex
direct
is better.
impact on your household sanity, right?
Yeah.
So spouses, partners, significant others, you have a stake in this as well. Support the woman who's going
Colleagues,
through this
yeah.
with information and research and just emotional, support.
Exactly.
Well, good discussion. We're hitting some issues, right? I'm going to leave you with this quote, and it is this. I don't like to think before I see it. I messed it up. I don't like to think before I speak. I like to be just as surprised as you by what comes out of my hot flashing, mood swinging, memory losing mouth.
Never know.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to The Five of Us. We want to hear from you with any questions, ideas, or suggestions for future discussions. Just write to us at the email you see here, and we will be eager to help. Talk to you next time.